Good day, class. We're going to be treating constructor today. Last time we introduced the concept of object-oriented programming. We said that is a programming paradigm that sees program solutions as interacting objects, and we said that objects are first created as templates called classes, just like we have building plans from which we build houses. The same way we have classes from which we instantiate objects, and we said that objects have two member property and member methods. So these two members, the properties, which we also call the attributes, are what we use to describe the object. They are the things we use to describe the object, just like a human being has a name, has a height, has a date of birth, and so on. The things you use to describe an object forms the member properties or attributes, or program-wise, the member variables of the object of the class. Then the things that the object can do, the behaviors of the object, we consider as member methods. They are functions that defines activities or actions that the object of that class can take. Many a times these actions alter the values of the properties. Today we are going to be looking at constructor, which is a further class into the concept of OOP. Okay, what is a constructor? It is a class member method that shares the same name with the class. What we are trying to say is that a constructor is a method, but how you differentiate it from other methods and identify it is that it is that method that has the same name as the class. So when you see any method that has the same name as the class name, you know that this is a constructor. This is a constructor. It is usually public and does not have a return type, not even void. Why should it be public? As the name sounds, it is a function that is called when an object is being created. That is to say, it is the object, it is the method or function that is used to instantiate the class. So, why should it be public? Why should it not be private? Alright, let's look at it. Where do you create objects? Is it inside a class or outside a class? The answer is that objects are created outside a class. And you know that for you to access something outside the class, it has to be public. So since constructor is the method you call in order to instantiate a class, then you know that it has to be public, because many times you will see it inside main function and other classes outside the class that is being instantiated. So therefore it has to be public, and it has no return type, not even void. We can have more than one constructor in a class. That is to say, we can have more than one method that have the same name with the class. So when you have more than one method that have the same name with the class, you know that we are talking about multiple constructors. That means the object can be initiated or instantiated in various ways. So when do we have more than one constructor in a class? How does the code know which one to call? How does it know I want the first constructor or the second constructor, since all of them bear the same name? Alright, what differentiates them is the signature. The signature of the constructors differentiates one constructor from another. And when we talk about signature, we're talking about the parameters the parameters of the constructor will make it different from one another. Some constructor may have no parameter, some will have parameters, even some may have the same number of parameters, but the data types of the parameters differ. So as long as these things are different, the two methods are not exactly the same. That means their signatures are not the same. When we talk about signature, we're talking about combination of the name and the parameter. So the combination of the name and parameter, as long as there is a difference or a little variation, we consider those two methods to be, what I call it, polymorphism. They have different forms. So when you don't define any constructor in your code, there is an inbuilt or default constructor that has no parameter, and it will be used to create the objects of the class. So when you don't declare one, in the code we wrote before, we didn't create any constructor. So it was the inbuilt or the default constructor by the compiler that was used in the code. So we're going to be looking at a rectangle class. We're going to be creating a rectangle class in this code in order to demonstrate what we'll be looking at today about constructors. So here are the properties of this class. We're going to have a length. A rectangle has length. A rectangle has width. So what about the methods? What are the methods of this rectangle class? It has get area to return the area of the rectangle. It has get perimeter to return the perimeter of the rectangle. Set length to change the length of the rectangle. Set width, it changes the width or assigns value to the width of the rectangle. Then show dimension, it displays the dimensions of the rectangle. So we're going to be looking at constructor in different cases. We're going to have case 1, whereby we are going to have a constructor with no, that is, we are going to write our code, but we are not going to provide a constructor, so that we'll see the default constructor at work. Then we are going to be overriding the default constructor. We're going to be overriding the default constructor. That will be the case 2. In case 3, we are going to be providing parameters for the constructor. And case 4, we are going to be providing what we call default parameters with initial values. That is default values. When we create parameters, we assign them default values. That will be the case 4. I'm going to be seeing how these 4 cases work. So the first case is the default constructor. We are going to create an object and call the show dimension method and see what happens after we have created the object. So here is a code I've already written. I didn't want to take time writing it just to save record time. So we are seeing the code hash include iostream using namespace std. So we have our on line 4, we have our class rectangle. It has 2 member properties, the length and the width, and we have the member methods, which are public. We have get area. What does get area? It just returns the area, which is length times width. We also have get perimeter, which uses the formula for perimeter, length plus width times 2. That's what it returns. So the next one, set length, which has a parameter, an integer parameter L. So what does it do? It assigns the parameter value to the member property length. They will have set width, which also has an integer parameter W. It assigns this integer parameter to the member property width. Then for the show details, it's just to display the length and the width of the rectangle. When you call it, it's a void method. It's just to display the length and display the width. So these are the basic members of this rectangle class. We have two member properties, length and width, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 member methods: get area, get perimeter, set length, set width, and show details. So, alright, in the main portion of this code, in line 48, we are instantiating a class object called myRec. That means rectangle myRec. So myRec is now a rectangle. So if you see here now, what is happening in line 48? We are creating the object rectangle myRec. An object will be created. But what we are trying to say now, which method was used to create this object? In our code, we didn't have any constructor. So because we don't have any constructor, it therefore means that to create this myRec object, the default constructor will be used. And when this default constructor is used to create this object myRec, what we may not have control over is the value that will be in the length, the value that will be in the width. We don't have control over what value they will take. It may be 0, it might be any value, but it is not in our hand. It changes even over time. So it's not in our hand to determine what the length and the width will be when the default constructor is used in this case. So we're going to see, when we create this object, we're going to see show details to see what length it has and the width it has. We're also going to ask it to provide the area and the rectangle. So I'll run the code now. You see, look at length 73. I don't know where it came from. Width 0. Area, of course, 73 times 0 will give you 0. Then perimeter 73 plus 0 times 2 will give you 146. So as you can see in this code, we were not the one that specified this 73. So that is the challenge of not having your own defined constructor. You cannot have right or power over what the initial values of the member properties will be. So this is why when you are writing a program that involves classes, it is very essential and good, a good practice to always have a constructor so that you will have control over your code. So you have control over your code. So we have seen the case one whereby we have instantiated an object with the default constructor, and we didn't have control over what the initial values of the member properties is going to be. So case 2, in case 2 we are going to override the default constructor. We're going to override the default constructor by writing a code so that we'll have a little control over our initial values. So we can have a little control over the initial values of the member properties. So in this case, we are going to be having a constructor. Good. You can see the name of the method is rectangle, the same name with the class. The class name is in line 4, rectangle. Then in line 10, we're having another rectangle. So this rectangle, having the same spelling and everything with the class name, is a constructor. This is a constructor without parameter. You can see that the bracket is open and closed, no parameter. But what we want to happen here? We want a situation whereby when the object of this class is created, the length should be 4 and the width should be 2. So that we will not have issue of the length and the width having a value that we don't have control over. So what we have just done is that anytime the object of this class is created, the length will be 4 and the width will be 2. So we are going to run the code again. Stay in line 53. We are going to say rectangle myRec. So whenever we say rectangle myRec, this constructor will be called. It has no parameter, that is why it is like this, just myRec, no parameter. So when we call rectangle rectangle myrec, this member method, which is a constructor, will be called. And when it is called, we are going to see show details. When it shows it, well, let's see what the length will be and the width will be and what the area and the perimeter will be. Wow, this is it. So we see that the length is 4, the width is 2, the area is 8, and the perimeter is 12. So you can see now we have overwritten. You see, we didn't change anything in the main. We did not change anything in the main part. So it means that when we did rectangle myrec before, the constructor that was called was the default one, because the default one doesn't have parameter. It is the default one that was called that gave our properties values that we don't have control over, but we now override it, having overridden it. So when we now call a constructor without parameter, it is the one we wrote that was now called, which is this one that has no parameter. That's the one that was called. So that was why the length was 4 and the width was 2. See it again, the length was 4 and the width was 2. So therefore we have seen that the default constructor has been overridden in this case. So we are going to go for the case 2. Sorry, we are going to go for case 3, not case 2. So what is happening in case 3? Case 3, we are going to be using parameters. That is to say, we are going to assign value to the member properties using parameters. At the point of instantiating the object, we are going to provide values for the member properties length and width. You know, in the other one, we did not provide value. It used the default value in the class. But we are talking about a situation whereby we want to determine by ourselves what the length and the width of the rectangle will be. So we are going to be making use of parameters to do that. So I'm going to drop another constructor. You can see the same name rectangle, but here now the signature is different. This one has no parameter, but this one has 2 parameters, meaning that if we are calling this particular constructor, we must provide the 2 values, the value for the length and the value for the width, and those values will be assigned to the member property length and member property width. So let's go to the main. Let's just copy the whole of this code and duplicate it. So we're going to say rectangle myrec. So we're going to provide 2 values, maybe 20 for the length and maybe 15 for the width. So we're going to say myrec2. Okay, I call it myrec2. Let me call it myrec2. Myrec2. This one, myrec2. 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 So let me just check and be sure that I edited properly. Okay, end line. All right, so that means we are going to be having 2 rectangle objects. The first one is myrec, which we are going to be creating with the first constructor without parameter. We are going to see the details, the length and width and the area and all the rest of them, while in this second one we are going to be having another rectangle with parameters supplied by us. Let me just ensure there is a different space between the 2 objects by just see out end line. So let me run the code. Beautiful. We're saying we have 2 rectangles now. One, the one we called with the without parameter, that we call the constructor without parameter that has values 4 and 2. See, length is 4, width is 2, area is 8, and perimeter is 12. Then the second rectangle, my rect2, we supply the length and the width at the point of creating the object. We saw that the length, we are seeing that the length is 20, the width is 15, area is 300, and perimeter is 70. So we are seeing two cases now. The first one, line 58, we called the rectangle, and which of the constructor was called? It was the constructor in line 10 that was called, because in that one we are not supplying any value, we just say rectangle, my rec. So this constructor in line 10 has no parameter, that's why it was called, and that's why the length was 4 and the width was 2. Then the second one in line 64, when we said rectangle, my rec 20 and 15, it is the constructor with parameter that was called, L and W. That's why it assigned 20 to length and assigned 15 to width. So this is a second constructor. That's for case 3. We're going to look at now the case 4. So in case 4 now we're going to be looking at a combination of case 2 and case 3 using default parameters. So the next case we are going to be looking at here is a constructor that does what the two previous constructors we have created before does. It does what the two of them are doing. So if we have that one now, this case 4, if we have it, we will not have need of the other two that we have done before. We will not have need of them. So let's go and see how the code looks like. So let's do that. There will be a problem anyway. So let's look at now. We have the third constructor in line 20. What's the difference between the second constructor and the third constructor? If you look at them, they are almost the same. But what the difference is that inside the parameter, we'll see values. We are seeing values. See, int L equals to 4, unlike the other one that just say int L in W. In the other one in line 15, you must provide value. You must provide value. But this one is saying, if you don't provide value for length, the length will be 4, just like what we have in the first constructor without parameter. You know, in the first constructor without parameter in line 10, when you don't provide value, length will be 4, width will be 2. So that is what we are trying to do here. When you don't provide value for length, it will be 4. If you don't provide value for W, which is width, it will be 2. But if you provide, it will no longer be 4. If you provide, this one will not be 2. The value you provided will be assigned to length, and the value you provide will be assigned to width. But if you don't provide value, it will take 4 and assign 4 to length, and it will take 2 and assign 2 to width. So you see that this code is doing what these two codes are doing. And if I run this program, it's not going to work. First of all, there's an error. The error is because this code is a duplicate of this previous two. So for this code had to work, we have to comment, we have to remove these ones. Let me remove them. Okay, let me just comment them so that they will not be effective anymore. Let me comment them. Alright, so I've commented them now, meaning that they are no longer active. So let me run the code again. If I run the code, you will see that my output will be the same as though I was using the two previous constructors. So let's see what will happen here. When I call rectangle without parameter, as in the case of line 63, when I call rectangle without parameter, what will happen? What will happen is that because I did not provide parameter, L will be 4 and W will be 2. So length will be 4, width will be 2. Then in the other case, which is in line 69, I provided 20 and 50. Let me just change it so that it will, let me just say, okay, 10 and 5 as my new set of values. So it now forming that instead of L to be 4, L will now be 10. Instead of W to be 2, W will now be 5. So length and width will be 10 and 5 because I provided parameters. But if I don't provide parameter, as in this case, it will take the initial values that I assigned them. Wow, are you seeing it at work? The first one, which is line 63, when I say rectangle my rec, it called the same constructor, but assigned 4 because I didn't provide value. It assigned 4 to length and assigned 2 to width and found the area and the width. But in line 69, when I call with parameter, it assigned 10 to length and assigned 5 to width and called it and all that. Then I'll just demonstrate one more case. What if I now have a case whereby I just have the length, but I don't have value for the width? I have value for length, I don't have value for width. Let me just say length is 10. I provided 10. I'm not providing value for the width. What will still happen? It will still call the same constructor because value has been provided for length, so length will be the provided value. Since I didn't provide value for width, the width will be 2. It will take the value 2 for the width. So let me, okay, that will have to be rectangle 3, my rec 3, my rec 3, my rec 3, my rec 3, and my rec 3. So I now have 3 rectangles. The one is rec 2, and my rec 3. So let's see what the result will be. Beautiful. As you can see now, in the third one now, we provided length, we did not provide width. It now took the original value that was kept in the parameter, which was the default parameter. It took the value of 2 because I did not provide. However, if you must provide value in the order they came. You cannot provide width without providing length. If you want to provide width without providing length, you have to rearrange their code so that width will come first before length. You have to provide values in the order in which they came. You can't provide for the second value without providing value for the first value. So I can provide for length, or I'll provide for length and the width, but I can't just provide for the width without length. So I can't jump. So if I must provide value, I must provide value in the order. The first value is length, the second value is width. So this is it about constructor. You can see that it is a method you use in creating the object of the class. And in this case, we have a class called rectangle, and we have tried 3 methods. We tried the default method by the compiler, in which happens when we do not provide our own constructor. And we said in that case, we don't determine what the value of your properties, member properties will be. You don't determine what their values will be. Then in the second case, we now wrote our own default constructor by overwriting what was there in the compiler generated constructor. So in that case now, we had a situation whereby the rectangle, something like this in line 10, we have it like this way. The rectangle, no parameter, we assign parameter to length and the width. Then the second case, we'll have a rectangle with parameter, the constructor with parameter. You have to provide the parameter at the time of writing this code. Then the last one, which is the order of them all, is default parameter, a constructor with default parameter that handles both cases. If you don't provide value, it will use the default values. If you provide value, it will act like a parameter constructor. It will use the value provided. I think this is it. You can go through the code and try 1 or 2 things on your own. You can as well comment in the video, ask questions. You can ask questions. When you ask questions, I will respond to your question. I also want you to subscribe to this channel. In my next class, I'm going to be looking at inheritance, which is the last class we are going to look at under object-oriented programming. I'm going to be looking at inheritance before we can go back to the other basics of C++ code. Thank you so much, and God bless you.